Welcome. My name is Amy Anderley. I am the co-owner of Legal Services. It's a dispensary and cultivation facility here in Denver. I'm also a work group member with the Cannabis Sustainability Work Group, and I'm a founding board member of the Cannabis Certification Council, formerly the Organic Cannabis Association. We are thrilled to have you here today to discuss sustainability and really just partake in an opportunity for learning. I think, for us personally and our business, we have been fortunate to receive the City of Denver's Certifiably Green recognition for our dispensary. At this point, we are the first and only dispensary to do so, and that has meant so much to not just us and our business and our team that we work with, but to our clients. I think that as we move forward in the cannabis industry, we're starting to see differentiation and people really looking for how their businesses are doing business and evaluating them both on their products and on the impact that they have on the community. That is why it's so incredibly important that I participate with the Cannabis Certification Council, because I believe, myself as a business owner, but also as a consumer, I like to know that my products are coming from a responsible source. And whether that be an organic best practice or that be sustainable and environmentally friendly practice, I think that that's really important. 4 years ago, the cannabis industry professionals and the City of Denver got together to really just share and learn and talk about ways that, cannabis industry could lessen its impact on the environment, but then also begin to shed the stigma of being energy hogs. I think that we have only recently as an industry come out of a darkness, and the pace with which we are ready to innovate in our own businesses is it's really staggering, and I think that there's an opportunity here to support the City of Denver. Many of you may know that the City of Denver has put forth some really challenging greenhouse gas emission reductions, upwards of 80% by the year 2050. And I think in some of the other states that people are visiting from and throughout the country, there's really a push now to be responsible and to take that on as an individual state or city. Well, how we can do that as a cannabis industry and support the governments that we work with, it's by having those collaborative discussions and by participating in events like this. The work group recently published a best practice manual that was worked on over the course of a couple of years, and you are going to be able to find that in the back hall. There's an executive summary, and there are a couple of full printouts of the entire best practice manual, and I really suggest you flip through that, because again, this is about that culture of learning, and we want people to consider getting involved, giving us feedback, sharing what they know, because I think that together we're going to be able to demonstrate that as an industry we can work cooperatively with the city and the states that we reside and really show them that innovation and the pace of progression for our industry is it can be an opportunity for us to exert leadership, and I think it's important given that we're in this relatively new space. So I want to point out, for many of you are business owners and you're working in the field, implementation does not necessarily mean you have to re-engineer your entire business to be more sustainable, more environmentally friendly. There are small steps to very complicated build-outs, and you can take those small steps early on when you think about your waste reduction, when you think about your corporate social responsibility. What is it that you are teaching and how are you leading in your business? So please enjoy the day's events and feel free to ask questions, ask for contact information, reach out to panelists. We have a number of people who have flown in throughout the country, as well as a really renowned keynote speaker that I'm excited to see. But I would like to take a moment to thank the sponsors. There is, of course, the City of Denver, the Cannabis Certification Council, Denver Relief Consulting. You've been incredible for us 2 years in a row, so thank you there. And everyone else who is participating, both with booth space, educating folks to what's going on, and then also at the Friends level. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Ricardo Baca, and enjoy your day. Have a great symposium. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Amy. Appreciate that. And if you haven't visited Amy's shop, Legal, it's definitely worth a trip over there. Especially, we're here to talk about in this panel in the next 75 minutes about standards. And I think standards translate to trust. I have friends who only smoke Amy's weed, and having tried her new distillate, I can see why. It's a beautiful thing. My name is Ricardo Baca, and I am a journalist. Lifelong, I was at the Denver Post for 15 years, and became their cannabis editor in late 2013. Was there for a while, founded the Cannabis, and now I lead my own content agency called Grasslands, and we work with cannabis, hemp businesses, and executives on thought leadership projects. So it's great to be here. I moderated a panel last year and had an absolutely spectacular time, and it's thrilling to be back. It's great to see this event succeeding, moving on to a second year. So thank you to people like you guys out there supporting this, volunteering for this, being interested in this. Having been a journalist who's reported extensively on this subject matter, including 13 months consecutively on illegal pesticide use in this industry, I can say that these are all incredibly important conversations that are going to help guide this industry in the years to come, in the decades to come. I wanted to speak briefly because I flew back from Oakland last night. I was out there emceeing the New West Summit, which is another conference. I talked with so many entrepreneurs out there who talked about, they felt like it was too late to get into the industry. Oh, I missed the boat, this alleged green rush. And one thing I told all of them was that it's definitely not too late. And we're actually still in these very early days of the cannabis industry, of legal marijuana. And I think this panel is an example of why we are so early. Because we're so early, we don't even have a set of standards by which the industry operates. I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists because they themselves are all working on standards and sometimes together and sometimes apart, and inevitably 5 years from now when we have this conversation, we're going to have standards that are more universally accepted, and it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. So without further ado, I will introduce your panel for Sustainability Verified, Utilizing Standards and Certification to Validate Your Company's Performance. Starting with this gentleman to my left, Derek Smith, who's the founder and executive director for the Resource Innovation Institute. Right next to him, we have Doug Fisher, who is the chief legal officer for the National Association of Cannabis Businesses. And next to Doug, we have Jacob Pulitzer, co-founder and president of the Cannabis Conservancy. And next to Jacob, we have Ben Gelt, who is with the Cannabis Certification Council, one of the organizations putting this on. So briefly, a quick round of applause for our panelists. And I'm going to let them, we each have our own presentations, so I'm going to let them get started. And who wants to get us started?
Sure, I will
Doug?
take it.
Perfect.
Can you hear me? All right, and do you mind if I hit the clicker?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so thank you very much for having me here. Thank you, Ricardo. As Ricardo mentioned, my name is Doug Fisher. I'm Chief Legal Officer of the National Association of Cannabis Businesses, which is the industry's first self-regulatory organization, or SRO. SROs, like the NACB, are in the business of setting and enforcing rules on a voluntary basis, which is similar to what a lot of the other panelists here do. Unlike my colleagues on this panel, I don't claim a particular expertise in the topic of sustainability, but I am well versed in standards and certifications, and so What I'd like to do is set the groundwork and talk a little bit about what are the hallmarks of good standards, how can you create effective standards, what types of certifications are going to be effective in building trust with the public, with regulators, with all stakeholders. And so for those not familiar with the concept, self-regulatory organization, as I mentioned, is an organization that creates and enforces rules for its members. You come across these in everyday life. FINRA in the financial industry, the Association of Realtors, even to some extent the Motion Picture Association of America. I think I have the network advertising initiative up there as well.
You have my presentation loaded.
I think digital advertising. So,
not be able to see the
we
screen.
just take the Realtors Association as an example.
You can do
They
it
have a code of ethics
from the
and
podium
rules
then. If you want to see
every
it
member
tomorrow,
can display the Realtor logo agrees to abide by. And it covers topics like submitting offers promptly, maintaining confidentiality of client information, disclosures of fees, and whatnot. The association enforces these rules by allowing customers to make complaints, and then they have their own arbitration process. Members who violate the rules face consequences up to and including expulsion. And so this way, the association gives comfort to the public that anyone who's got that logo, the Realtor logo and that title, is acting responsibly, and that in turn helps give confidence not only to those consumers but to regulators who might otherwise be inclined to impose a bunch of regulations. That I think is the framework for what we're talking about. And now I'll turn to what I mentioned, which is sort of what are we looking to accomplish with standards and certifications. You'll see a few bullet points up on the screen. I'll talk through each of these. And they may seem basic, but I think there's some layers of detail, and I think you'll see how these are illustrated by each of the other panelists. So first, increasing legitimacy in the eyes of regulators, and this is meant to be a cooperative effort, as Amy referred to up here. This is regulators at all levels, local, state, federal. If we just take the federal example for a second, I think it's inevitable that a variety of federal agencies, EPA, USDA, will eventually have their straws in the lake. You're already seeing the FDA allegedly expressing interest in medical claims around cannabis, and having standards for responsible conduct on any topic, but particularly on sustainability, is a show of good faith to the regulators, and they can take a degree of comfort that the industry is self-policing, assuming the standards are widespread enough. And if they're not widespread enough, but you as a business owner are upholding certain standards, when they look to say, I want to understand problems with just, for example, pesticides in the industry, I think it's a pretty safe bet that those who are not going out of their way to be certified, they meet certain standards, are the ones who are going to be first in the crosshairs of the regulators. The second topic I have up there is about shaping future regulation. I think we all recognize that the private sector in a lot of ways is out ahead of the government, the public sector, in terms of understanding how to address issues that are unique to its industry. And so by coming up with really truly effective standards, businesses can shape and help their government partners understand what effective regulation will look like, and it also becomes a business advantage. One of the best stories I've heard about this relates to the labeling of products as gluten-free. So there's an organization called NSF, and they created a gluten-free standard well before the FDA did, and it regulates what type of processes need to be in place to ensure machines aren't contaminated, what are the acceptable parts per million of gluten, and that was several years before the FDA came out with those standards. The FDA standards ended up being similar, but a little bit less stringent, actually, than the NSF standards, and so all the businesses that had taken it upon themselves to adopt the NSF gluten-free standard were good to go when the FDA standards came out. Otherwise, businesses were left scrambling. The next one, I don't think I need to harp on too much, but promoting public trust in the industry. This is what Amy was talking about as well. I mean, corporate social responsibility is something I think everyone here takes seriously. That's why we're here, and standards sort of give some meat to the bones on that. It's a way of explaining how you're being socially responsible. And then, related to that is your business opportunities. It's not just consumers that necessarily care you meet certain standards. It's also business partners. It becomes much easier to do business with another business that is living up to certain obligations. So all of these benefits, I think, are contingent upon having standards that are legitimate and having a process for certifying compliance that's effective. If it's too easy to be certified or if certification doesn't address the right issues, people won't place much stock in the certification. So I'll throw up on the next screen just a few more bullet points about what do you look for when you want to see if a standard or a certification is really legitimate. And I will say this is all context dependent, and so none of these are hard and fast rules. I look at them as guidelines. The first one is about the process for adoption. So the International Standards Organization, or ISO, has actually standards for standards, essentially, fairly meta. And one of the big points that they make about it is that any rules you have to have really need to have sufficient input from all the right actors, and that they've been placed through a really deliberative process. So that translates, I think, to big picture questions like who's making the standards, what are their expertise, what set of stakeholders was given an opportunity to participate. Was the public heard? Were government regulators heard? Were different types of businesses heard? What type of research went behind the standards? Was there some sort of vote or democratic process around their adoption? The more that goes into the creation of standards on the front end, the more legitimacy they'll have. And I will highlight that, again, all context dependent. Some things are beyond debate in terms of safety and don't necessarily need a large deliberative process, where other things are much more nuanced and really have a lot of facets that need to be examined. The second one is really, is the certification addressing the right issues? And this probably seems a bit silly, but if, for example, if people care about environmental impact, and I'm sure the other panels will talk about that, what does that qualify? I mean, that's a huge scope, and within that, dozens upon dozens of subtopics, and different contingencies are going to have different things that they think are most important. So when designing a standard and a certification, what are you addressing and how clearly are you communicating what's being addressed? The last piece up here is about certification, and I might call it enforcement as well. And essentially, I think when a skeptical person asks the question, how do I know a business actually meets these standards, or what are you doing to verify it, is the answer to that question. So, a certification endorsement can run this whole spectrum from simply a business signing something saying, yes, we are meeting these standards, all the way down to, random inspections to make sure they're meeting those standards, which is, the far end, and I don't think realistic for anything we're talking about here. But I think the point is, there needs to be some assurance that, at the time the certification is granted, the business meets whatever standards are being certified, and there's some periodic refresher of it as necessary, so that people are confident the certification is truly meaningful. I'll close out by saying, I don't think there's a right approach per se on any of this. These are all just the factors to consider. And so I'm very excited to see what my colleagues have to say, and generally to see the work of they're doing and the rest of you are doing towards sustainability. I'm really looking forward to a robust discussion.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And now I believe, Derek, you're going next?
Yes.
All right, great. Don't forget the clicker.
Thank you. I'm gonna stand over here. Is this mic on? You guys hear me? You want me to turn this on? Okay, great. I'm standing over here because I couldn't see the slides. I wanted to make sure I knew what I was talking about. Okay, is this on? The big one is what I should be looking at, right? Okay, great. All right, hi. So I'm Derek Smith. I'm with Resource Innovation Institute. I'm going to share with you our process of creating energy, carbon, and water standards for the industry. I first want to thank everyone for hosting the event and having us here. I want to say hello to, we have several members of our organization in the audience and members of our technical advisory team, our advisory council, and Kevon Kalabari is our Colorado board member. So a lot of members and supporters here today, and we appreciate it. So Resource Innovation Institute is a national nonprofit. We are based in Portland. Everything we're doing is stakeholder driven. And whereas sustainability is an extremely broad topic and really could cover almost any subject matter, we are exclusively focused on energy, carbon, and water, believing that those are really critical and sort of root level issues that will affect the industry's future in a dramatic way going forward in a number of ways. We are focused on setting these standards, helping advising on policy and incentive design, so working with public agencies and utilities as an example to help support the industry's move toward more sustainable practices with support from multiple other actors in the market. We also put on events, both large sort of cannabis, energy, and water summits, which we've held in Portland and Seattle, dealing more at the state policy level. We're working on an event like that in California next year as well. We also put on smaller events that are, say, focused on improving HVAC performance in a cannabis cultivation facility. And again, everything we're doing is bringing in multiple voices so that we can begin to norm ourselves toward best practices. That's what's obviously challenging about this industry is when best practices aren't even really agreed upon, it's really hard to set standards. And this industry has gone a long time without establishing real best practices other than sort of word of mouth, grower to grower, all of which is very important, and there's a lot of wisdom there, but it needs to be brought out, documented, and brought forward. And I want to recognize the work group in town here for putting together the best practices manual. Really, really nice piece of work and a hallmark piece of work for the industry going forward. So we believe that resource efficiency will define the future of cannabis. We say that for a number of reasons. We already see falling prices in the mature markets, hit very hard here, Washington as well. Oregon will be next, California will be next, et cetera. That's a normal trend. This is normal in any industry to face price pressures as more supply comes on. And we've seen it in other ag sectors, right, where there are razor thin margins that, if you're operating a big basil plant or whatnot, you need to figure out how to be, eking out a margin of 1% or whatnot. It's not where this industry is quite yet, but it might be someday, and we need to work our way collaboratively with, like I said, all the public agencies, the manufacturers of the equipment, the utilities, and all the stakeholders to come together to help support the industry to transform toward that outcome. And of course, consumers will expect this. I would say the cannabis industry is relatively lucky from a PR standpoint. There's a few stories here and there about how much of an energy hog we are, but for an industry that by some accounts is responsible for 1% to 3% of the country's or a state's energy load, that's catches some attention, right? But generally, the industry has an increasingly positive reputation, and that is something to leverage, right? And we have a risk point if we don't set standards and hold everyone accountable to moving toward a more efficient type of production going forward. All of that to say, there are some great actors out there and a lot of emerging technology and new best practices that are coming to light, and we want to put a spotlight there and help folks see the way that you can reduce your energy and carbon and water impact while improving your yield, ideally. And then, we're beginning to see some regulation on energy from multiple states. California is expected to release their energy rules or their rules for production starting January 1, which we expect to have some sort of energy requirement on the industry, if not immediately on January 1, probably within 6 months. And generally, what California does on energy is what the rest of the country does, so it's something to watch for there. So we are facilitating and advancing this resource-efficient cannabis economy. We're bringing together all these actors. We are very focused on capturing data. We actually believe it's almost impossible to set standards in a situation like we've got here unless there's data. And so we are helping utilities, public agencies understand the industry by providing data. We're surveying growers. We have some tools that I'll share with you in a moment. And we're working with market leaders to help bring forward the best practices. We're looking across all types of cultivation, capturing data, documenting the best practices, establishing the standards. So, you know, the main thing I would point out today is that the challenge here is that there isn't much data. And it makes sense. We're in an early stage of the market. And ultimately, we need to capture data to form best practices and standards, and then move the industry toward that market transformation. So we're here today to launch for the first time to the cannabis industry a new tool that we have called the Cannabis Power Score. This is in a beta version right now. It's available at cannabispowerscore.org. We welcome you all to go check it out. It's in a public comment period. This is not calculating a score yet. We're actually asking input from the industry on how we should think about capturing the score. So what this is a web-based tool. It's essentially a self-audit tool where a grower can either do a quick provide data and get a quick output of how they compare to other like growers doing similar types of production in the similar climate zone, so they can understand and use that as a tool within their decision making, along with their their cost profile, the demand for what they're growing might be. So we're looking at kilowatt hours per gram or grams per kilowatt hour, depending on the audience, kilowatt hours per square foot. Ultimately, that needs to get to BTUs as we look at other sources of energy in greenhouses beyond electricity. But the idea is that we're capturing all the data points that are representative of an energy profile within a variety of cultivation facilities. And then that can serve as the basis of the industry standard. So the more we can get data that growers will give us, and we will do this in a confidential way, we'll have an agreement that we will not share the data that relates to the producer's name or address. We will share the data in the aggregate and at the line item, but not, again, not associated with the producer's name or address, just zip code, so that utilities and public agencies can understand what's going on, and they can help support the industry through data to develop incentive programs that buy down the costs of efficient technology and develop policy that can help, for example, support a quicker transition to renewable energy. So we believe that we have the opportunity to create the most resource efficient industry on the planet. This is, I think we all are very excited about this industry because it's just emerging and there's a lot of opportunity to innovate. We've got innovation in our name. The idea for us is that, with very little infrastructure established and the opportunity to set a supportive environment around the industry with policy and incentives, that we actually can move here fairly quickly, and that is our intention to do, and we invite you to join us. Thank you very much.
The Cannabis Power Score. I look forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah.
Jacob, take us away, man.
Will do. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for having me. Very excited. I'd like to thank everyone who was on the work groups to put on this conference, as well as get the best management practices completed. That was a good 2 years. Glad we have something to show for it, finally. Big sense of relief. So I will be, oh, do I need the clicker, or how do I, did you leave that clicker? Yeah, it's right there. Ah, there we go. So I'm going to talk about cannabis sustainability standards, what my organization has done, and try not to repeat what Doug has put so eloquently. It's actually how I started this slide, which is like standard credibility. So instead of talking about what these actually are, because I think Doug did a great job of doing that, I'll kind of wing it a bit and talk about how these relate to the sustainability within the cannabis industry. So, open process is really stakeholder engagement. Things like that, being open and accessed to everyone who wants to participate, public commenting, things like that. And we're starting to see that with a lot of different organizations sprouting up. NCIA is doing that with their committees that are going on, as well as all the organizations up here. And in addition, there's a lot of, especially in California, is being very proactive in how the regulations are going to work. I just had a talk with them, and they're waiting for their CEQA, their California Environmental Quality Assessment, to get certified by the state, and then they'll be rolling out what their statewide standards are going to be. But there's still 360 days for that to become permanent because it is an emergency measure. So there is the opportunity for anyone who wants to participate in that, to give comments. And it's a state organization, so comments have to be addressed. Then talking about transparency, we feel like all standards should be open to the public, as well as how they were developed, which is kind of what Doug was talking about. But I think transparency also goes into truthfulness. Sustainability in all industries, have to deal with greenwashing. And it does kind of come in with the transparency is, are the claims that are being made honest? Are they verifiable? We're trying to be a very data-driven organization, so we developed our standards that all of our certified growers have to measure and monitor what they're doing, so that they're collecting that data, so that ultimately they're making a better, more informed decision. And then they have to be relevant and kind of adaptable. And adaptable means, standards don't necessarily tell you how to do something, but where you should be doing it. Or this kind of sets the bar, but it should be encouraging innovation. So 10% reduction in carbon, that could be a standard, but not necessarily how you should reduce your carbon, because it's going to be different for each individual operation, as well as for each locale, as well as standards should be relevant in the sense that they actually they should identify and try to mitigate the most significant environmental impacts of an operation, and so that's going to vary depending on where you were. Water was a huge environmental concern and impact in California when they're having the drought. Now it's moving a little bit more towards carbon, whereas in Colorado, we don't necessarily always have a water issue. I mean, we do, but our share, what our grid is producing is a lot of coal, so it's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. It's a lot of carbon issues. Reducing energy, especially indoor grows, is more of a significant impact when you're talking about kind of the holistic health of the environment, and that's kind of what sustainability is a holistic view of all of our environmental impacts. And then I would just with impartiality, there we go. ISO 17065 is what Doug was talking about, where it's kind of the rules for certification bodies, and within that is a very detailed way of what they call a quality management system, and that's how a certification body conducts itself. It really has to do a lot with conflicts of interest and how those are mitigated, as well as having a very structured, documented process so everyone understands what's going on. So this certification essentially equals that certification, or sorry, that certified farm is on the same level and has documentation and record keeping and proof, and so is this farm. So everyone understands that there's not, a huge disparity within the certification, though ours at the moment kind of does, because we really view certification and what we're trying to do, we're very, we're focused on trying to make a real impact into the cannabis industry, the cannabis community, as well as the world and for future generations. These are the 7 pillars that we've divided our sustainability standards into, and I would say our overarching vision, mission, whatever, is really to have created a structured framework to oversee and evaluate the grow process. We want growers to be proactive We want them to be able to have the information to make the decisions. We're trying to meet growers where they are. So this is the third rendition. We're in the third rendition of our standards right now. We'll be doing another full community stakeholder engagement process for version 4 starting in 2018. What we realized is growers are all over the place. We're seeing a big discrepancy between the more historically agricultural, growers from the East Coast who have done certifications because they've either sold other products into Europe, they understand the framework, versus our California clients who are traditionally, just cannabis cultivators. You don't want to write anything down because that essentially could be the court case against you, and trying to bring them into this more regulated environment. And so what we ended up doing was dividing our standards into mandatory, preferred, and bonus. So mandatory, like you have to have this or you can't get certified in each one of these categories. Preferred is kind of what we would like everyone to be, but realizing that they're not there. So kind of giving the people who aren't there the opportunity, the direction that they should go to, and then bonus is people who are doing like outstanding work. And the idea is that once we collect enough data, we'll be able to break the certification down into multiple tiers. And so bonus, everyone who's got all the bonuses will be different, than the other ones. And really how we've developed it was taking a very ISO 14001 base and then bringing in other standards into that, so that it's really for the grows to have, progressive improvement and incremental implementation. They also have to be a company. They can't spend the farm to try to be as sustainable as possible without making sure that it fits within their budget and within their, profit margins and all of that. So essentially what I'll go through quickly is these pillars as we see them. So policy and imitation is governance, essentially. They need to have sustainability policies, they need to have SOPs. That's the way for us to it's for us to limit our liability, but also for the company to mitigate their risk, to know that what the vision is, who's doing it, the grow manager, what he says is being followed down when he's not around. Because that's when we mostly see pesticide use, things like that. When someone doesn't want to get in trouble, the grow manager's been gone for a week, they have spider mites, they're just going to spray Avid, no one's going to know, it will take care of the problem, and then test positive. Like it was very common in the black market. Land and infrastructure, so we look at land management use, mostly for outdoor greenhouse grows. We do have some infrastructure efficiency, which is more of like our lead-ish kind of certification for indoor grows, because building efficiency is a very big factor in the energy usage of an indoor grow. Then we look at water, energy, waste, and all three of those is really where a facility and operation is going to see dividends paid off, because all three of those is overhead costs. And if you can reduce them, you're going to save money. You also should have a higher quality yield and a more consistent yield. And then harvesting and processing is really kind of our risk mitigation from cross-contamination, things like that, making sure they're stored properly, that they're handled properly, they're processed properly. I was just out auditing grows last week, and really it dawned on me, cannabis is one of the very few products that potentially could never be washed from being harvested to being the consumer. And that within that, quality control and taking, that understanding, is a huge ordeal, and that's really what that aspect of it is what we're trying to solve. And then cultivation, which is essentially our organic, but we also have all of the bonuses, which is more of a regenerative farming platform. And so this is the MyGrow, so our certified product comes with this QR code that essentially links the customer and the patient back to the grower, because that's the whole idea. We're a voluntary third-party eco-label. We're a type 1 eco-label, but we're market-driven. And what we really wanted to do is bring the consumer, give them as much information as possible so they can essentially vote with their dollars, vote their values, buy their values. In fact, we think that the more information a consumer has, the more well-educated they are, the better decisions they're going to make. And so that was really the idea behind this. So the product there will have a sustainability score, pictures of the farm, the values of the farm, how it was grown. You can see the whole process, lab results, all at kind of the consumer's fingertips. And just as if you're thinking of doing a certification in general, any type of certification, I would say, the benefits of it is really, it's a lot of risk mitigation. So you have, your liability, essentially from the state, you have your brand reputational risk to take consideration, supply chain, We're seeing a lot of cross-contamination. It occurs in agriculture as well. Organic products get mixed with non-organic products after it leaves the farm. It gets tested afterwards. Who's at fault? How did it happen? That's what our certification really tries to address. It helps with insurance, customer loyalty. You can enter new markets, kind of carve out a niche for yourself. Regulatory relations, it's a seal of approval essentially, and so you could take that to show any regulatory agency that you're doing the right thing, whether that be a water board, your utility company, their licensing body, and then there is the potential for premiums in the marketplace. Everyone in the organic industry charges a bit more, kind of the same thing. It is an option. We chose to go the sustainability route because we felt that being sustainable is the efficient use of resources. You'll be able to create products with higher quality for a lower cost point so that you don't necessarily have to charge your premiums, but it is an option. And that's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob. And up next we have Ben Gelt.
Did I do it right? I did. Okay. So, it's right in front of me. How nice. Where's the clicker? Hi, everybody. I'm Ben. I'm a founding board member with the Cannabis Certification Council, and so one of your hosts today. So I just want to start by thanking all of you for buying tickets and committing a day or a day and a half to coming out and participating in something that I'm very comfortable saying is a pretty unique event in the cannabis industry, having worked in this space for about 7 years now, dating back to 2011, starting with the University of Colorado Toxicology Lab, trying to advance the standards for testing for pesticides and residuals and additives, and seeing what that looked like in 2011 versus being like on a stage in front of a paid audience is a pretty stark difference for me. So thank you. I also really want to specifically thank the Denver Department of Environmental Health, and specifically the folks who are involved with the Certifiably Green program, Janet and Susan and Emily Backus, who's not here. If you don't know them, they're here and they're fantastic people. They do incredible work for the city of Denver, and their involvement in this is really critical and greatly, greatly appreciated. So thank you to them, and thank you also to all the sponsors. Kayvon has been mentioned a few times. I'll give them one more shout. They do a lot to support these issues, this event, and all of our sponsors have really been terrific this year and last. We're very pleased about the turnout for this year. A lot of people bought tickets. I think there'll be more people coming in throughout the course of the day. So thank you. So with that all said, I'm going to go through my presentation. I'll try and be pretty quick, focus on what we are trying to do, and bring it back to open up some dialogue and hopefully some questions. So I titled mine a little bit tongue-in-cheek, Certifying Organic and Fair Trade Cannabis, Naturally. Why organic and fair trade? Why not, right? I mean, these are really well-established certifications in almost any category that you look at, and there's no reason that cannabis shouldn't have the same standards and certifications available. In fact, organic is one that, due to marketing, due to confusion, due to consumers thinking that because it's a plant, it must be natural, organic is something that a lot of consumers believe already exists in the marketplace. And it does at some level, in that some producers may be doing it, and we have some great folks, including some of my colleagues up here today, who are offering certifications that are in that vein. But there's nothing that's very clear and obvious to consumers that says this is an organically produced product. And that's something that we think is going to happen. As Ricardo said, this will all be in place in 5 years, so it'll just be a matter of who did it, and we'd like for the organic and fair trade piece to be with us. So why the Certification Council? We're a 501c3 organization, which I'm sure most of you have heard of. It's a very standard, traditional nonprofit arrangement. We're the result of a merger of two existing organizations, the Organic Cannabis Association, whom some of you might know, had been around in Colorado for several years and was working to get to a national level, and we merged with a group in Oregon called the Ethical Cannabis Alliance, so a merger of two groups bringing together organic and fair trade missions. We've organized as what's called a standard setting body, and I won't get too far into this because some of the folks who came up before talked about the different sort of standards for standard setting bodies and these things, but suffice to say that being a standard setting body is typically the best way for a group that's going to publish a standard to structure so that we remove any conflict of interest. So we will be contracting with third-party organizations to conduct inspecting and auditing. And as the standard setting body, we will publish initially an organic standard and then a fair trade standard. And our job after establishing those standards is to promote the hell out of it. And that actually gets really into what a lot of these guys are talking about, which is we can make standards and say we're going to do these things a certain way until we're blue in the face. But until consumers start coming into stores and saying, where is the organic? Where is the fair trade? Where is the certification? It's not going to have the kind of market traction that we see when we go to the supermarket and everything is labeled and everything is done for us, and the organic product is typically 15 to 25% more expensive than the conventional. So quickly moving on, why does this matter? It matters for all the reasons that everybody has already talked about. Transparency, giving consumers real options. I often tell people there's a reason why there's more McDonald's or Burger King than Whole Foods. It's because most people want taste good, cheap, and that's fine. It's fine. But there is an important and growing cohort of consumers out there that insist on fair trade, that insist on organic, that insist on pesticide-free, that insist on these kinds of ethical production standards behind the products that they consume. And there's no question that there's a significant overlap between what I again call the Whole Foods consumer and the cannabis consumer. There are a lot of people going to the supermarket and shopping around the edge of the store and getting the organic and getting the fair trade and getting the local grass-fed blah blah, and then they go to the dispensary and it's like, what's the strongest shit you got? And it's like, that's a huge disconnect. And that disconnect is mostly a result of a lack of education, because a lot of those people are going into stores. There's no real information in those stores other than pure marketing, which you guys are really good at, those of you in the industry, God bless you, and that's fine. That's how we make decisions as consumers. But until we have more meaningful standards to back up some of the claims and consumers can have real transparency into what's going into it, we're not going to have the kind of meaningful price deviation that we see in other spaces in this space, and those producers that are actually investing in a higher quality product are not going to see that benefit. So that's why it matters, because people are already demanding this, people are already expecting it, there are many people that are trying to produce it, and we need to create a pathway for all of those people to be rewarded for that behavior. And a certification with a clear value, a clear offering, and a clear meaning is exactly how you do that. And is that it? That's it. So.